Namaste, welcome to A Questioning Mind. I am your host Sagarika, and I wish you all a very happy new year. This is a very quick roundup of things that have been happening in the world. And it's sort of a mini roundup because I know there's a lot of information that's out there, but I'm picking up a few of the things that have been most prevalent over social media in over these last few days. And one of the first things that I know that a lot of Indians are thinking about is the issue of racism against Indians, and the guise under which it came about in its newest form. It has been the H-1B visa. So there's a lot of MAGA, which is the Make America Great Again Trump faction, which is the far right faction of the Republican Party, which actually supported Trump. Now, Trump has had a lot of bad publicity around him, calling him a racist and how he's a white supremacist and things like that. However, if you go to see his political messaging, it has never really been along those lines. Now, what has happened is that a lot of his followers are, in fact, white Christian supremacists. And since he came on the back of the illegal immigration issue, what has happened is that now it's gotten to this legal immigration, but also specific to Indians. So, as long as people are white, a lot of these folks have white and Christian, a lot of these folks have no issues. But with Indians who have who've done exceedingly well in their fields, whether in IT, whether in basically in San Francisco in the tech field, as well as in healthcare, medicine, and very high achieving STEM fields, engineering fields, wherever that has been required of legal migrants, Indians have performed exceedingly well. They have a very low rate of criminality. They pay 4 times the taxes in proportion to their presence in the US. So that's been a massive thing. It's like the model minority, the best performing minority of all of them. Now, this has made a lot of these supremacists extremely insecure, but also, frankly, they're just racist and needed an outlet. It's not that racism has been absent from the American discourse ever. What has been very blatant about this is how it's very overtly anti-Indian and anti-Hindu, regardless of how one identifies themselves, whether they're an Indian Muslim, Indian Christian. As for the outside world, identity, after all, isn't about oneself, about how one identifies themselves, which is why this whole identitarian game in the last few years has been a bit of a joke. It is also about how one is perceived by the world outside of themselves, how the world perceives oneself, world perceives you. And so most of the people, as long as they are, they call themselves Indian, they will be judged by the color of their skin and their race, essentially, as a Hindu. And that's been very fascinating to watch the internet sort of just break down into this insane Hindu hatred, Indian hatred over the H-1B visa issue. Now, the issue itself is that their progression from H-1B to the green card line has been a bit of a challenge. Like it's been a major challenge, but especially for Indians. Now, they have this influencer who wanted to be part of the Trump administration, but seems to have gotten not a lot of attention from their camp, who came out, Laura Loomer. She's had some very crazy takes over the last few years. She came out openly in order to abuse Indians. And the pot was more stirred by Vivek Ramaswamy, who spoke about how American culture has deteriorated and how education was a problem in the US. And look, the whites were saying this all along, especially about the blacks, that, they do not care about education. But now that someone in the Trump administration, sorry, my coffee it's getting cold. Someone in the Trump administration actually came out and said that people who promote jocks, essentially athletes and beauty queens, over engineers and doctors, cannot expect excellence in these fields. And thus, we need the migrants to do better because we don't want America to be left behind. So now these guys are like, oh, Americans are not, they were using very bad words. So most of these folks were talking about how Americans are not stupid. They can very well progress to the level of Indians as long as they're given the education and the opportunity. However, the people at the forefront of these attacks, of these very racist, very badly abusive, verbally abusive attacks, are actually not very competent in their fields. Many of them are merely participating in this outrage war, monetizing their Twitter payouts. The good thing, not really good, honestly, it showed the face of the American right. There have been many people who supported the Indians in this regard. It was very much from the left, but it could just be a reaction to the racist faction being from the right. So it may not really be because of the Indians themselves. It's just that it may just be a virtue signaling. Now, with regards to people who can actually take action in this matter, whether it's Elon Musk or Trump, they've both come out heavily in support of legal migration, about how it's very necessary to keep the US at the forefront of things. And look, it's very obvious when legal migration does not happen to a place with relatively low population density like the US and with a declining fertility rate, what happens is that if Indians aren't going, or the Chinese aren't going to contribute to their engineering or tech jobs, what happens is that eventually those jobs will be outsourced to India, just because capitalism works that way. And welfarism or communism cannot actually bring in the revenue that is necessary to keep the state afloat. So either way, it's not that white Americans, I mean, there's no one really stopping them, but what they're advocating for is sort of a DEI equivalent for the white folks. And not getting that has sort of made them spiral down into this insanity of extremely racist rhetoric against Indians in particular. So we'll see how that pans out, but one must be aware that over the last year, over 2024, there have been many, many murders of Indians, students, of adults, of everyone. And not many of them have been investigated. In fact, when an Indian girl died, there was a police officer who was recorded laughing at her death. So the attitude of many of the Americans has been very negative for no reason but racism. And Indians are outside of these urban encampments, which are mostly the tech part. It's not that people are very used to intermingling, and thus the idea of the US being a melting pot only applies to certain parts of the US. And these people who are advocating this have essentially come to be known as the woke right by some of the people trying to make the Republican Party a little more stable and progress in line with the ideas that Trump and his team got him elected on, which was essentially meritocracy. Now, these are people who are not meritocratic in nature. The racists making these comments are essentially people who don't care for merit at all. They care to be to have an ethno-state that is purely Christian and white. And the reason I'm laughing about it is because it's very much along the lines of sort of a Nazi state. I think I will be losing views because I use that word, but that's essentially what it is. They want an ethno state, and they keep saying America first, but white 30% of the American population, right? So it's not America first. They are advocating for a white first policy situation, which has not really been part of the American growth story as such, because if we go back to after the Cold War, U.S. actually not imported. There was a lot of their scientists were, Jews who were being persecuted in Germany, who came and helped, did their best work in the U.S. And similar situations. There's been a lot of people that the U.S. has always had from the outside. That's why Vinod Khosla was also able to build Hotmail and AOL and all of, all the tech people have done so well there. So now, what prevents a lot of American Indians from building is actually, so there's also been the rhetoric that Indians are essentially tech workers and they're not founders, so they add less value. Either way, they're adding value. Okay, they're one of the highest tax-paying minority in the U.S. But what also happens is that their lack of founding is due to the H-1B visa issue. It does not allow for a lot of people to become founders. And the reason that Indians are overrepresented in the H-1B visa queue is also because there's a lot of backlog of green card issuance. Indians are not issued green cards at the level and the speed, at the quantity and the speed that they should be issued, and Chinese come a second, but they're far off second. The number of Indians is manifold, many times that of the Chinese that are waiting for a green card. So once they get a green card and become American citizens, that's a different issue. It changes their game. And of course, Indians have been very good integrators. They have very low rate of criminality. But what has been obvious is that they brought up Hindu gods in their discourse, in that very racist discourse. They depicted Ma Kali and Ganesh ji as, demons, and spoke about all these things in very bad, showing them in very bad light. So that got a lot of Indians to sort of dunk upon them. There were some Korean participants that were quickly shown their place as well, which was hilarious to watch, because eventually, when racism comes for one, it comes for all. If anyone remembers, then only last year, Russian cats were not allowed to participate in cat shows because they were Russian. And articles got written about how they had their Slavic origins and they weren't actually white, they were Asian. And so one can keep spiraling downwards into this divisive discourse. But, that is what the situation is in the US right now. And frankly, Elon has not come out, or Trump has not come out in favor of Indians per se. They've just spoken in favor of legal migration, which is completely fair. And, Trump's been pretty colorblind in that regards. Choosing Kash Patel as the director of the FBI has been a major shift. And Vivek Ramaswamy, as part of DOGE, is going to be working alongside Musk. He is quite an unapologetic Hindu as well. Also, Tulsi Gabbard, even though she's not Indian, she holds India in high regards and is the director of DNI, to who the CIA and the FBI report to. And so, there's not a lot that this faction can do, but what it's doing is it's splitting this currently. It's splitting the winning side before it's even taken power. So Trump comes into power in over the next couple of weeks. The administration is set to begin on the 20th of January. But before that, there's so much divisiveness in the Republican camp itself that it's creating a bad look for the winners of the 2024 election. So that is one of the stories, and I had hoped to kind of not have such a long conversation on it, but well, here we are. Now, another thing that happened there is that there was a horrific terrorist attack in New Orleans, and 12 people were lost. It was found that 12 people had died in the attack, and many, many scores of people had been uh, injured, critically injured, when cars drove through a New Orleans street. And the man who was behind the wheel was recently converted, not recently, but well, he was converted former army veteran who had books radicalizing him, material radicalizing him to into such an action were found in his house when it was raided after he was killed. So it was a very, very horrific thing, and there have been many parts of this terrorist sort of thing happening. The way the death toll in the first case has actually risen to 15, and it carried an ISIS flag. So it's quite interesting that these people are being radicalized, probably even in a US military base. So that's pretty scary. And yeah, that happened. Then one more thing, another thing that actually involves India is that the Maldives foreign minister has visited India as his first foreign visit in the new year, and India and Maldives are set to sign quite a few partnership agreements. So Maldives seems to be back in the Indian camp. He did the current. So there were these rumors recently about how India was dictating terms to Maldives, and the former president of the island nation actually came out in support of India and said that they're very good partners and have never sought to dictate terms to anyone. They allow us to function as a democracy. So this is news to me, and I would not agree with this. So that was good. However, we know that the current president Muzu is very much in the China camp, but it did not work out. The whole India Out campaign and its actions against India have not worked out very well, frankly, economically, because most people seem to forget that geopolitics actually includes geo as one of the major factors driving the politics. So Maldives does not have a lot of leeway in this regards. It's a close neighbor to India and is economically quite dependent. And Indian military, the personnel have been allowed to be stationed again. That happened a few months ago, but then the foreign minister's visit here has, sort of signaled a reset in a positive direction of Indian and Maldivian ties. So that's interesting, but also along similar lines, we saw Waqar-uz-Zaman, who's the Bangladesh army chief, speaking about how India has been a very important partner, which is quite a bolt out of the blue, so to speak, because so far they've been incredibly antagonistic. But this is not coming from the interim caretaker of Bangladesh, it's coming from their military head. So he has not spoken exceedingly well of India or anything of that sort, but he did state that India is a very important partner nation, and India's been taking a lot of action against illegal Bangladeshis in the nation as well in India and deporting them. So it is not particularly significant considering how many millions of them are actually in India, but only a few score are being sent across. Okay, a few hundreds are being sent across, but it is sending a message, because this is not this hasn't been done, and some of these people have been stationed in the country for decades. People have lived for 30 years, 20 years, 17 years, and they've been in the country, and now they're being deported because they've been living illegally on forged documents. So, and the last couple of things that I want to talk about, one that has gotten social media in a bit of a tizzy has been Diljit Dosanjh meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which was which came about as being unexpected because for many of his audience, Diljit Dosanjh has been someone who is not very fond of the current government, but although he's not been political at all, he's managed his presence quite well. But with his cozying up to Pakistanis and not being outspoken against the Khalistanis at all, it's he's been seen as sort of an agent of those who aren't part of the, who would not support the BJP at the center. And so a lot of his former supporters who praised him as having a spine and things like that, such as social media influencer and columnist Rana Ayub, have deleted their tweets about how he was very brave. But the supporters of the BJP have also spoken about how this was completely unexpected and how even he had to come and meet with the prime minister, considering the stature of the office as well as of India at this time. It is not something that could be easily ignored. And it was seen as quite a surprise, relatively pleasant surprise, but it also brings into focus how artists like Guru Randhawa, who have been, who've had their celebrity in a time before, um, the current crop of Punjabi singers, they would not get as much of an audience because the prime minister and his office and his party seem to believe in not preaching to the choir, or, in sort of stepping into or trying to meet with the perceived enemy as such, more than, or speaking to such causes more than to their supporters. So there is that sense in the messaging as well that is being seen. So that was an interesting occurrence in the new year. He was one of the first people to meet the prime minister in the new year. I mean, the prime minister has been busy and he's met with a lot of important people, but Diljit Dosanjh kind of stepped into the new year with the Indian Prime Minister being his first major event. And so that was, it's interesting to see how social matters develop in different political milieus. So that happened. And the last thing that I want to talk about is how Blinkit has started an initiative of bringing ambulances through their app. So this is a gap that has been unexpectedly, it's a major gap in the Indian ecosystem infrastructural system. And though private hospitals provide ambulances and government hospitals of course have them, the thing is that they were not easily available, and capacity building is always an issue in a country with a population density as large as ours, population numbers as large as ours, and population density so high in urban areas, right? So this is a gap that has existed for decades, and it's amazing that a private company like Blinkit, which is not part of the healthcare space, has stepped into this and tried to make find a solution, and I hope that it allows them to, profit off of this, just so that this model is sustainable, because profit makes sure that good initiatives are actually sustainable. If something is not making money, it will be shut down because the economies of scale don't scale. So, however, the response from a certain side of social media has been sad, honestly, where they're calling this dystopian and the failure of the government. Now, the government is not supposed to be involved in absolutely everything, for one. However, it's not as if Blinkit has stepped into any government services. They're just bridging a gap that, considering the amount, the number of vehicles that are necessary, it isn't only the government that regular people are reaching out to. Very often, ambulance services have actually been captured by a sort of mafia, same as any others in many urban areas and pockets. What happens is that they're very extortionist. In fact, one of the people speaking out against it, who's a major social media influencer, spoke about how one of his patients was charged 26,000, and she had no money. And later, when they reached out and tried to send the police after them, it was discovered that the charges were only 6,000, but they extorted 26,000 at a time of extreme distress. And so that's something that's very common, actually. Anywhere that there is a significant dependency on a certain institution, and corruption is not really that efficiently tackled, these will always be issues. Now, Blinkit is bridging that gap and providing services to those who are able to pay for them without actually stepping on the toes of. It's not like government services have shut down and no one is going to be able to access them anymore. It's just that they're adding on to this. But most of the communist thought process actually speaks about every resource being a fixed buy. Like, oh, there's going to be 100 ambulances across the city, and so Blinkit will take up the space of 60 of them. That's not how it works. There's 100 ambulances now, and Blinkit will probably add 60 to it. As an example, the numbers are completely off. So that's the situation. But it's been honestly sad to see that the age of many of these people commenting has been young, and I'm not sure that having young people be so communist in their approach to economics and being impractical in their pursuit of the ideal is a good thing. I hope that young people educate themselves a little more about the cons of communist economic thought process. As you can see, with every communist nation, whether it's been East Germany, North Korea, apart from China, which is now collapsing under its own weight, but most of them have done pathetically when it comes to such things being implemented. So that's sort of my roundup. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to do this more often, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.